The days that followed the fishing trip were like a drink of cool, clear water after years of wandering in a desert. The promise Ty had made by the river, the promise to fix his mistakes, had acted as a key, unlocking a new level of ease and intimacy between them. The final fragile walls of their separation seemed to dissolve under the warm, late summer sun, and for the first time since his return, Ty and Amy began to rediscover the simple, beautiful rhythm of being partners. The change was most palpable in the wide open spaces of the Alberta foothills that surrounded their home. One bright, windy afternoon, they took Spartan and Harley out for a ride, just the two of them. It wasn't a planned event. It was a spontaneous decision, the kind they used to make all the time. They galloped across the vast, rolling fields, their horses' hooves a thundering drumbeat against the earth, the wind whipping tears from their eyes. For Ty, it was a moment of pure, unadulterated freedom. He urged Harley on, feeling the raw power of the animal beneath him, the world a blur of green grass and endless blue sky. He glanced over at Amy on Spartan, her body moving in perfect sync with her horse, a wide, joyful, and completely unburdened laugh on her face. In that moment, she wasn't a survivor he had to protect or a stranger he had to win back. She was just Amy, his Amy, wild and free and beautiful. The sight of her, so full of life, was a powerful antidote to the darkness that had haunted him for so long. He felt a surge of love so fierce it was a physical ache in his chest. They finally pulled their horses to a stop at the top of a familiar ridge, the same one where they had once stood and faced the painful truth of their changed lives. Today, it held no ghosts. They sat on their panting horses, looking out at the breathtaking panorama of the ranch nestled in the valley below, the majestic snow-capped peaks of the Rocky Mountains, a hazy purple silhouette on the far horizon.
I forgot how much I missed this. Just this, with you.
Me too.
He said, his voice full of a quiet awe. It was the truth. He had missed it all, but he hadn't realized how much he had missed the simple, profound joy of sharing a perfect moment with her. Their newfound rhythm extended beyond the grand, sweeping moments. It found its way into the small, mundane corners of their life, weaving a new fabric of domestic intimacy. A few days later, they drove into Hudson to pick up groceries, a simple chore that felt like a significant milestone. In the brightly lit aisles of the local store, they fell back into an old, familiar pattern.
Do we need more of that terrible cereal Lindy likes? The one with the sugar-coated monsters?
It's not terrible. It's her favorite. And yes, we are definitely out. She would never forgive us.
He pushed the cart while she held the list, and they playfully debated the merits of different brands of coffee, their easy banter a quiet, normal sound in the middle of a normal afternoon. They were just a husband and wife, doing their weekly shopping. It was an act of such profound, beautiful ordinariness that it felt like a miracle. But for Ty, the normalcy was a fragile thing. As they walked out of the store into the familiar bustle of Hudson's Main Street, a flicker of his old anxiety returned. His eyes scanned the faces of the people passing by, his body tensing subconsciously. He was looking for a familiar blue truck, for a calm, handsome face that had become the living symbol of his greatest failure and his deepest insecurity. He knew he had to talk to Nathan. He had promised Amy he would fix his mistakes, and this was the biggest one. But how? How could he possibly explain the whiplash of his own emotions, offering his wife one day, wanting to fight for her the next? The thought of the humbling, impossibly awkward conversation he needed to have was a cold knot of dread in his stomach. He pushed the grocery cart a little faster, a silent retreat from a confrontation he knew he couldn't avoid for much longer. The truest test of their renewed partnership, however, came back at the ranch in the place where their connection had always been the strongest, the round pen. They were working together with a new client's horse, a powerful but deeply fearful gelding that refused to be saddled. Jack had tried, Amy had tried, but the horse's panic was too ingrained. They stood together in the center of the pen, the horse circling them nervously, its eyes wide.
He's not being aggressive. He's terrified. Something in his past. The saddle is a trigger.
His last owner used a heavy Western saddle. Maybe the weight, the way it was cinched.
They worked as a seamless team, their old synergy flowing between them as if the last 4 years had never happened. Amy used her quiet, intuitive approach, her voice a low, soothing murmur, her body language completely non-threatening. She got the horse to stop, to breathe, to finally look at her with a flicker of trust. While she held the horse's attention, Ty approached from the other side, not with a saddle, but with a light, soft blanket. He didn't try to put it on the horse's back. He just let the horse sniff it, touch it with its muzzle, his own movements slow and deliberate, his veterinary knowledge informing every action. He knew which muscles to watch, which twitch of an ear signaled a rise in anxiety. "You've got him, Amy. Just keep talking to him. Easy now. That's it. You're okay. You're so brave." They were a perfect duet, her intuitive empathy and his clinical expertise working in perfect harmony. After an hour of patient, quiet work, the horse stood perfectly still as Ty gently, finally, laid the blanket across its back. It was a monumental breakthrough. Later that evening, they sat on the porch swing, a comfortable, satisfied exhaustion settling over them. The sun had set, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the vast, darkening sky. The day had been full of small, perfect moments, the exhilarating gallop, the easy laughter in the grocery store, the shared triumph in the round pen. Ty looked over at Amy, her face soft in the twilight, and his heart felt so full of love, it was a physical ache. He was happier than he had been since his return. But the joy was a bright, fragile thing, and he knew it was shadowed by the secret he was still keeping, the final, difficult conversation he had yet to have. He reached out and took her hand, his grip warm and sure. The time for promises was over. Soon, it would be time for the truth. The idyllic peace of the afternoon had given way to a tense and dramatic evening. A storm born in the distant peaks of the Rocky Mountains had rolled across the Alberta foothills with an impressive speed, its dark, bruised purple clouds swallowing the last of the daylight. The wind began to howl, a low, mournful sound that whipped through the eaves of the old Heartland barn, rattling the windows in their frames. A sudden, sharp drop in temperature signaled the arrival of an early autumn cold snap, a reminder that the seasons were, as always, turning. Inside the cavernous, lamplit space, Ty and Amy worked in a comfortable, practiced rhythm. The impending storm had created a shared, singular purpose, securing the animals for the night. They moved from stall to stall, checking on each horse, their voices a low murmur of reassurance against the rising crescendo of the wind. The easy, domestic partnership they had rediscovered in the preceding days was on full display, a seamless and unspoken choreography of two people who knew each other's movements as well as their own. "Can you double-check the latch on Spartan's stall? It always rattles in a high wind and spooks the others." Ty already did. It sat solid as a rock. He was closing and latching the high window at the far end of the main aisle, his frame a dark silhouette against the last of the fading, stormy light. He turned and saw Amy looking up towards the loft, a thoughtful frown on her face as the first fat drops of rain began to hammer against the barn's tin roof. "With this cold snap coming, I should get those extra wool blankets down for the foals, just in case it gets really bad overnight."
Good idea. The temperature dusts some light. Want me to grab them? I can be up and down in a second.
No, it's okay. I know exactly which trunk they sit her in. You finish up down here, make sure the water troughs are full.
She gave him a quick, warm smile before heading towards the steep wooden ladder that led to the hayloft, a familiar and trusted path. Ty watched her go, a sense of quiet contentment settling over him. These were the moments that felt the most real, the most like coming home. The simple domestic rhythm of two people working together to protect their home, their family. The larger, more complicated issues, the unresolved pact with Nathan, the difficult conversations that still needed to be had, seemed to fade into the background, kept at bay by the simple, immediate reality of the approaching storm. He turned his attention to the last of the chores, the sound of Amy's footsteps echoing on the wooden floor of the loft above him. Up in the loft, the sound of the wind was a deafening roar. Amy moved through the familiar dusty space, the air thick with the sweet cloying scent of old hay. She located the heavy wooden trunk where the winter blankets were stored and pulled out two thick plaid wool ones, their familiar weight a comfort in her arms. She walked back towards the square opening in the floor, the world outside now completely dark, the rain coming down in a driving, relentless sheet. The old wooden ladder was a part of her history, its rungs worn smooth and familiar by a century of use by her family. She had climbed it thousands of times since she was a little girl, her movements sure and certain even in the dim light. She started her descent, her body angled sideways to accommodate the bulky, folded blankets in her arms, her boots finding each rung without a thought. She was halfway down, her mind already on the next task, when her world tilted on its axis. A single treacherous piece of dried hay, slick from the damp air, was lying on the next rung down. Her boot, already at a slight angle and unable to find its usual solid purchase, slid off the smooth wood. For a split second that stretched into a terrifying eternity, she was suspended in a state of weightless disbelief. She felt the lurch in her stomach, the desperate, reflexive tightening of her grip on the blankets, her body's instinctive but useless attempt to right itself. She let out a sharp, involuntary cry as she fell the last 7 or 8 feet, the blankets tumbling around her like clumsy woolen wings. She tried to catch herself, to roll with the impact, but her landing was awkward and brutal. Her left foot twisted unnaturally beneath her as she hit the hard-packed dirt floor of the aisle. A bolt of white-hot, searing pain shot up her leg, from her ankle to her hip. It was so intense, so sudden that it stole the air from her lungs. Another cry tore from her lips, this one not of surprise, but of pure, unadulterated pain. Down at the other end of the barn, Ty heard her first cry, a sharp, panicked sound that was instantly followed by a heavy, sickening thud. His head snapped up, every nerve in his body on high alert, his blood running cold.
Amy.
He called out, his voice sharp with a sudden, immediate dread. The only answer was her second cry, a sound of such raw, genuine agony that it sent a spear of pure ice through his veins. He didn't think, he just moved. He dropped the water bucket he was holding, the water sloshing over his boots unnoticed, and sprinted down the length of the barn, his boots pounding on the floor. He rounded the corner of the stalls and saw her, a crumpled heap on the ground at the base of the loft ladder, surrounded by the scattered blankets, her face pale and twisted in agony in the dim yellow light of the barn. For a horrifying second, his own past trauma threatened to overwhelm him. The image of her, broken and in pain, was a visceral, terrifying echo of his deepest fears of loss. But then, 4 long years of intensive medical training, of learning to push past emotion in a crisis, took over. The panicked husband vanished, replaced by the calm, focused veterinarian. He was at her side in an instant, his hands hovering over her, his voice a low, steady, and incredibly reassuring murmur that cut through her own rising panic.
Amy. Hey. It's okay. I'm here. Just breathe. Look at me. That's it. Just breathe.
She looked up at him, her eyes wide with shock and pain, tears of agony and fear streaming down her face. My ankle. Ty, I think it's broken. Her voice was a strained, panicked gasp. Okay, just stay still. Don't try to move. Let me look. His hands, which had been trembling with a deep, personal terror just moments before, were now surgeon steady. He knelt beside her, his touch both clinical and incredibly tender, as he gently ran his fingers along her shin and calf, searching for any obvious signs of a fracture.
Can you tell me where it hurts the most?
Right here.
She winced, her hand gesturing to the outside of her ankle, which was already beginning to swell visibly, a dark, ugly bruise forming beneath the skin. He prodded the area with a practiced, gentle touch, his eyes watching her face for her reaction. His mind was a cool, efficient diagnostic tool. No obvious deformity of the bone, good range of motion in the toes, so no major nerve damage. Pulse in the foot is strong, so circulation is fine.
I don't think it's broken, Amy.
He said, his voice full of a quiet, professional confidence that immediately began to soothe her own panic. It's a bad sprain, a really bad one, but I don't feel any displacement in the bone. We need to get you back to the house, get some ice on this, and elevate it, but you can't put any weight on it at all. The reality of their situation settled in. They were at the far end of the barn, the truck was parked outside, 100 yards away, through a now driving, torrential rainstorm, and she couldn't walk. The problem was clear. He looked from her injured ankle, to her pained but trusting face, and then towards the distant rain-lashed lights of the house. The solution, in his mind, was even clearer. The diagnosis, delivered with Ty's calm professional certainty, hung in the air between them. The immediate searing pain in Amy's ankle was now accompanied by a new logistical panic. They were at the far end of the barn, a long 100-yard journey from the house, and a full-blown Alberta thunderstorm was now raging outside, the rain coming down in a driving, almost horizontal sheet against the barn doors. Okay, she said, her voice shaky as she tried to think through the pain, her mind automatically shifting into problem-solving mode.
Amy, okay, maybe if you helped me up, I could hop to the truck. We could just drive up to the house.
No. The word was gentle but absolute. There was no room for argument in his tone.
You are not putting any weight on that foot. Ho, not an inch, and I sup not leaving you here to go get the truck. Was Sir doing this another way?
Before she could protest or ask what he meant, he was already moving. He knelt in front of her, his expression a mixture of the focused veterinarian and the deeply concerned husband. He carefully, gently, positioned one strong arm behind her back and the other under her knees. Just relax, I've got you.
Amy, Ty, you don't have to. I'm heavy. You'll hurt your.
Her protest was cut short as he lifted her from the ground in a single, fluid, and surprisingly effortless motion. A small, involuntary gasp escaped her lips, and then the world shifted. For 4 long, desolate years, Amy Fleming had been a pillar of strength. She had been the steady hand, the soft place to fall, the one who carried the weight of her family's grief and the full responsibility of the ranch on her own 2 shoulders. She had learned to be independent to the point of fierce self-reliance. She had forgotten what it felt like to be held, to be cared for, to be carried. But now, she was in his arms. The feeling was so overwhelming, so powerful, it was a full-body shock that momentarily erased the throbbing pain in her ankle. It was a torrent of sensory memory, a flood of a life she thought was lost to her forever. It was the scent of him, a familiar, intoxicating mix of rain, horses, and something that was just uniquely, fundamentally Thai. It was the feel of his strong, steady arms holding her securely against his chest, the solid, living warmth of him seeping through her clothes. It was the sound of his heart, a calm, powerful, rhythmic beat right next to her ear, a steady drum against the chaotic symphony of the storm raging outside. She instinctively wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in the crook of his shoulder, a gesture of pure, unthinking trust. The walls she had so carefully constructed around her heart, the ones built of grief and self-preservation and a quiet, lonely strength, didn't just crack, they were instantly, completely, and utterly obliterated. All the pain, all the confusion, all the heartbreaking distance of the past few weeks melted away, replaced by a single, profound, and undeniable truth. She was home, right here in his arms. This was the only home her heart had ever truly known. For Ty, the moment was just as transformative. The feeling of her, so light and fragile in his arms, was both an agony and a paradise. It was the physical, tangible reality of everything he had almost thrown away. Holding her like this, her body pressed against his, her complete and total trust in him, a tangible weight, solidified the chaotic, warring thoughts in his mind into a single, diamond-hard point of certainty. The promise he had made to Amy by the river, the silent vow he had made to himself while holding her during the fishing lesson, now became an unbreakable oath. He would fix this. He would undo the stupid, cowardly, and disastrously misguided pact he had made with Nathan. He would never, ever again allow a shadow of doubt or a whisper of another man's name to come between them. He would fight for her, for them, for this feeling. This was the only thing in the world worth fighting for. He began the long walk from the back of the barn towards the main doors, his steps steady and sure, his precious burden held tightly against his chest. The journey through the cavernous, dimly lit space was a silent, reverent procession. The only sounds were the howling of the wind, the drumming of the rain on the roof, and the soft, synchronized rhythm of their breathing. It was a silence charged with a renewed and powerful spark, a silent conversation of reconnection that was more intimate than any words could ever be. When they reached the main doors, he paused for a moment, turning his body to shield her as he pushed the heavy sliding door open just enough for them to slip through. They were immediately hit by the full force of the storm. The wind tore at them, and the cold, driving rain soaked them in seconds. But Ty didn't flinch. He lowered his head, protecting her face with his own body, and started the long walk across the dark, muddy yard towards the warm, distant lights of the house. He was her anchor in the storm, her shield against the elements, and as he carried her across the threshold of the back door, out of the violent, raging darkness and into the warm, quiet safety of the kitchen, they both knew that this was more than just a simple act of necessity. He had carried her home through a literal storm, and in doing so had finally, truly begun the journey of bringing their hearts home too. Ty carried her through the back door and into the warm, quiet sanctuary of the Heartland kitchen. The storm raged outside, a wild and violent symphony of wind and rain, But inside, the only sounds were the frantic pounding of Amy's heart and the steady, reassuring rhythm of Ty's breathing. He moved through the familiar house with a sureness of foot that felt both nostalgic and deeply right. Amy, held securely against his chest, felt like she was in a dream, a surreal journey back in time. She watched the familiar rooms of her life pass by. The living room with its stone fireplace, the hallway lined with family photos, all from an angle she hadn't experienced in years. He reached the bottom of the main staircase and, without a moment's hesitation, he started up. He walked right past the open door of the guest room, the room that had been his lonely island for weeks, his stride never faltering. Amy's breath caught in her throat. It was a small, simple choice, but it was a profound declaration. He wasn't taking her to be cared for as a patient, he was taking her home. He carried her into their bedroom, the space that had been her solitary refuge for 4 long years. It was a room haunted by his memory, every object a testament to his absence. But now, with him here, the room didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt complete. He gently laid her down on the bed, his movements full of a deep and practiced tenderness. "Ty, you don't have to. I can manage." Her protest was weak, a half-hearted gesture of the independence she'd been forced to learn. "Just let me take care of you, Amy," he said, his voice a low, gentle command that silenced her completely. He was a man with a purpose, and for the first time in a long time, she was that purpose. For the next half hour, he was a whirlwind of quiet, efficient care. He disappeared and returned with a basin of ice water, a stack of clean towels, and a roll of compression wrap from the emergency kit. He knelt on the floor beside the bed, and his hands, which could gentle the wildest of horses and perform the most delicate of surgeries, were now focused entirely on her. He worked with a focused intensity, his touch both clinical and incredibly intimate. He gently unwrapped the temporary bandage, his fingers probing the swollen, bruised ankle with an expert's precision, his gaze constantly flicking up to her face to check for any sign of pain. Amy just watched him, her heart aching with a love so powerful it was a physical presence in the room. This was the man she had fallen in love with. Not the ghost, not the broken survivor, not the sad stranger. This man, the healer, the caretaker. The one whose hands, whether on a wounded animal or on her, were always a source of profound comfort and safety. The pain in her ankle was a dull, distant throb, completely overshadowed by the overwhelming emotional intensity of the moment. She was seeing him, truly seeing him, in his purest form. He finished wrapping the ankle, his work neat and professional. He gently lifted her leg and propped it up on a pyramid of pillows, ensuring it was perfectly elevated. His medical duties were complete. The immediate crisis was over. And with that, the unspoken rules of their fragile, separated reality came rushing back into the room. The air grew thick with a sudden, charged awkwardness. He had been her medic. Now he was once again her estranged husband. He stood up slowly, wiping his hands on his jeans, his gaze not quite meeting hers. The easy, professional confidence was gone, replaced by a familiar, hesitant uncertainty. The role he had just played so perfectly had ended, and he was once again a man who didn't know his lines. "You should get some sleep." His voice was quiet, almost formal. "I'll check on you in a little while, make sure the swelling is going down." He took a step back from the bed, a physical retreat into the safe, distant role he had been playing for weeks. He turned, his intention clear. He was going back to the guest room, back to his island. A surge of pure, unadulterated panic shot through Amy. No, not after this. Not after the intimacy of the rescue, the feeling of his arms around her, the profound rightness of him being here in this room. She couldn't bear for that wall to go back up between them. She couldn't lose him all over again. Her voice, when it came, was small, fragile, and barely more than a whisper, but it cut through the sound of the raging storm outside and stopped him dead in his tracks. "Stay." He froze, his back still to her. For a long, heart-stopping moment, he didn't move, didn't breathe. A wave of pure, unadulterated hope, so powerful it almost buckled his knees, crashed over him. He had been so determined to fix his mistakes, to earn his way back, to not push her. But this was an invitation. He turned around slowly. She was looking at him, her face pale in the soft lamplight, her eyes shining with unshed tears and a raw, open vulnerability. The look on his own face as he met her gaze was one of all the pain, all the confusion, and all the walls he had built being washed away, leaving behind only the pure, undeniable truth of his love for her. He walked back to the bed. He didn't climb in. He sat on the edge beside her, a profound respect in his posture. He reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her forehead, his touch as light as a whisper. He leaned down and his lips met not her mouth, but her cheek, a kiss so full of tenderness, of reverence, of a love that had survived death itself, that it made her close her eyes and just breathe. It was a promise of a new beginning, a gentle acknowledgement that their healing had to be as patient as his care for her sprained ankle. He pulled back slightly, his lips still close to her ear. The story ended with his warm, whispered reply, the two words that had been absent for 4 long years, the two words that meant everything.
Good night, sweetheart.